Now for our roundtable with our News Channel 5 political analyst Brian Crowley and Isadora Rangel, former Treasure Coast reporter, now a member of the Miami Herald editorial board. I thank you both for being with us. Brian, first thoughts on Amendment 4 that will seek to enshrine abortion rights in the Florida Constitution.
Well, it's going to turn into a huge issue in Florida. We've already got the Democratic National Committee trying to make it a Trump issue, of all things. They're putting billboards up in Florida, they announced Friday, blaming the whole thing on Trump. And it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not Democrats are able to get a significant enough turnout to approve the amendment, to also have an impact on other elections in the state and on the presidential election. It's going to take a lot of work because it takes 60% to make that amendment law.
Isadora Rangel, first thoughts.
Yeah, not only does it take 60% approval for this amendment to pass, but I think there's a big question mark on whether it will help Democrats down the ballot. Political did an analysis not too long ago that showed in states where abortion was on the ballot, Democrats didn't necessarily win more seats. In fact, a lot of times these ballot measures, they passed with support from people who voted in support of abortion rights, then voted for a Republican down the ballot. So I think that this notion that somehow this will be this watershed moment for Democrats, I remain highly skeptical of that. You know, it might certainly help them, but will it help them enough in this situation?
Interesting points by both of you. As always, we already see, of course, that Democrats, Debbie Powell running against Rick Scott, it's going to be a major theme. It changes the contours of the debate and in many ways may take all the oxygen out of the room in terms of an issue. Talk more about this in terms of the politics of it. We talk about Florida as a red state. Nobody's expecting it to change the dynamic between the Biden-Trump camps, but talk a little bit more about that, Isadora, than you, Brian.
Yeah, I know. I think Florida has definitely shifted to the right. But I think the issue of abortion tends to be more nuanced. Even some polling shows that this abortion measure might get support from, swing voters, even some Republican voters. And that's why I think the 6-week ban is probably not in line with popular opinion. Now, there's a bigger question, I don't think abortion is the magical solution for Democrats. They are in a 800,000 voter registration deficit in the state of Florida. Is abortion and marijuana enough to reverse that? I think definitely we'll see a lot of Democrats campaigning on the issue of abortion. But I still question, I think there's so many factors that are going to, play in these elections.
We'll talk about the recreational marijuana amendment in a moment. Brian, Ron DeSantis, 2022, Roe v. Wade was still fresh in minds. He wins by 19 points against the Democrat Charlie Crist. Instructive at all for building on what Isadora said about don't assume which way this takes votes?
No, I completely agree with Isadora. Yeah. This is a very, very red state. I think that we may find some middle-of-the-road voters who will vote to approve the amendment, but aren't necessarily going to start voting for Democratic candidates.
Split their vote in the ballot issue versus candidate.
And I think we're middle-of-the-road candidates will look at this. I think that many people were comfortable with a 15-week ban. But when the 6-week ban kicks in on May 1st, I think you wind up with increasing numbers that have a problem with that, and that could help with the amendment. But I completely agree with Isadora. I don't know that this necessarily changes the outcome for Democrats throughout. And it'd be interesting to see whether or not Ron DeSantis decides that this is an issue that he wants to get aggressive about in the weeks and months ahead. He's already called the amendment nonsense, but we'll see whether or not he gets actively involved in this, because the 6-week ban is dicey.
And that may be, and we're reading that in commentary around the country, you have Floridians will decide a 6-week ban all the way up to enshrining abortion rights. But the point that you and Isadora raise is the interesting one. People don't walk in and vote necessarily up and down ballot in a monolithic fashion, and how that will split in terms of votes and who votes is interesting. Isadora, the governor also threw down the gauntlet. He says, I don't think this can get 60% of the vote. Does history serve as any guide there? It is a difficult threshold to meet for any amendment.
Yeah, some other states that are red states like Ohio have passed similar measures, but Florida has that added obstacle. You need 60% of voter approval. Obviously, it's hard to make a guess at this point. I think there are strong chances that this ballot amendment might pass. But we see already some Republican officials attacking it, saying that it is extreme, even though the amendment would essentially return abortion rights in Florida back to what they were after Roe v. Wade for almost 50 years. So calling that extreme, to me, it makes little sense when the legislature passed a law that bans abortions when a lot of women don't even know they're pregnant. So I wonder if that's going to stick with voters. It will certainly appeal to the more conservative religious base of Republicans, but those middle of the vote voters, I think that they look at 6 weeks as less digestible than 15 weeks, like Brian said.
Isadora and then Brian, recreational marijuana going on the ballot, and any other week it would get top billing, but in some ways that debate's been suffused this week. But let's talk about Amendment 3, recreational marijuana. Thoughts?
I'm really interested to see how many Republicans or independents may vote for this amendment, because I think legalizing marijuana is a bit of a bipartisan issue to me. Just talking to people in my own circles, I think that there will be a lot of bipartisan support if it passes, or even if it doesn't pass. And there's a really good case to make here. In 2018, or was it 2020? Voters approved raising the minimum wage in Florida to $15 by 2026, which is, you would say it's a very progressive idea. That same year, that was 2020, by the way, voters in Florida also voted for Donald Trump. So there's a strong chance a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump also voted to raise the minimum wage. So we have to stop thinking of in red and blue terms when we're talking about these amendments. Although, because I think there might be some bipartisanship going on here, too.
Well, that's why we have two of the best for analysis, to get away from this notion that everybody walks into the booth and says, I feel about this way on a huge hot button issue, and that will inform my candidate vote as well. And Brian, to recreational marijuana, this debate's gone on and on and on. Some states that have approved it are having second thoughts about re-adding some restrictions. But having said that, Amendment 3 in Florida, it'll be there for that vote. Again, a high vote muster, 60%.
Well, one of the things that with the cannabis amendment, it opens the door and allows for the legislature to pass laws regulating and controlling it to some degree. I was listening to House Speaker Paul Renner on Friday, and he was talking about how people would be smoking it in front of children in parks, and he just made it sound like marijuana would take over the entire state. Apparently he doesn't have any trouble with somebody drinking a beer in front of kids in a park, but he's very troubled about somebody smoking a joint in front of kids in a park, but
Long way to November. The debate is on. Isadora, we've only got about 45 seconds left in this segment. Not the only amendments there. There's one other, before we went on air, that we should mention. We're going to talk about all of them at a point, but take it away for another 30 on one of the amendments we were talking about.
You already, listen, I live in South Florida. You already see people smoking weed in public spaces, so I'll just leave it at that.
And then Amendment 1, you wanted to briefly talk about school board races.
Yeah, Amendment 1 is another one that people need to pay attention to. It would make school board elections, which are currently nonpartisan, and it would turn them into partisan races where people will have to declare if they are Republican, Democrat, etc. This is an effort, I believe, to make these races even more partisan than they are today and insert these more culture wars issues into them.
Isadora, Brian, plenty for us to write and talk about in the coming months as the contours of the political races take shape in more ways than one. We'll be back with more in a moment.